Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today, Mr. Buck Johnson joins me. Buck and I talk about our path through libertarianism and into orthodoxy in kind of an abstract way, but I think you will get the gist of what we were talking about, finding that freedom doesn't come from an absence of a hierarchy, but a legitimate authority or hierarchy, and how orthodoxy fills that void. FoxandSons.com. Go to FoxandSons.com to get the best coffee in the world and put that BBC in your mouth, baby. FoxandSons.com is how I start my day, with BBC in my mouth. That's big, bold coffee at FoxandSons.com. The Marc Clair Show is a place where you can find all the esoteric conversations you want to hear, whether they be about entrepreneurship, ghosts, demons, or spirituality in general. Go to the Marc Clair Show. Marc Clair was the host of Lions of Liberty for 9 years, and he has spent the last year reaching out and expanding his horizons in podcasting. And now he's coming to you with brand new material, most of which is not politically or libertarian related. So go check out the Marc Clair Show and see what everybody else is talking about. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. All right. I'm here with Mr. Buck Johnson. You know him, you love him, and he's making another appearance. What's going on, buddy?
Enjoying Lent. That's a weird thing to say, but it's all good so far. It's week 1, so week 1 you can enjoy something. We'll see how it. We'll see. We'll revisit this in a few weeks.
Well, you're you work out, and so there's something about that resistance. It does something to a person, and you're so familiar with it, like some sort of physical resistance.
Yes, I use that analogy in my mind all the time, and it helps. So I've used it a few times, and I heard a friend of mine who's a trainer. She's Orthodox, and she made a video of why Orthodoxy is analogous to starting a workout routine, and it makes sense to me.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like I was telling you a while ago, like the physical stuff, it really doesn't bother me. I'm like, all right, whatever. Like that's not what moves me, motivates me. And, but it's that mental, like getting in my mind and shaping my mind around the why and what it is that I'm actually doing and pointing at.
Yeah, and this is the first fast where I hope this doesn't bore your listeners, but like where I increase the prayer rule quite a bit, and I look at that almost as a workout too, where it's like, all right, this is rather than 10 minutes, this is 30 minutes at a time, but then I'm done, and it's like, okay, like a workout, like that was good, that was nice.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to bore them. I think it fits into the conversation we're going to have because this is kind of what I wanted to touch on. And you know what? I have this here. I meant to pull it up, and I'm retarded sometimes, so forgive me. But we wanted to talk about finding liberty, and you and I don't know, what year did you start podcasting?
2018.
Okay, so it was right around the same time I started podcasting. I started in September. I think I released my first episodes in September of 2018.
Okay.
So we were right there in the basically the same time frame.
And now we're in this same time frame.
We are. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's like we've been, and I've said this about Pete as well. So, but it's like we're walking. I think you and I have become a lot closer in the last year than we were before, just because we found ourselves in very similar situations and what we were going through. And I'm not going to worry about that text right now. I'm kind of half looking and half talking, so I'm just like, whatever. Anyway, so we're both kind of going in the same direction. We're both thinking the same things. And I think we both stumbled on Orthodoxy similar to the same time. I think I went to my first liturgy third week of October in 2021.
That's the same.
Okay. Yeah.
Right after the Thaddeus event at my house that you were at.
Yeah. It was just a couple months after that. Yeah.
That was that month. That was October 2021.
Was that in October? For some reason, I was thinking that was August. Okay.
We can't have an outdoor event in Texas in August.
I do it all the time. But you're right. No, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, it was the third week of October. And I remember it was the third week because the next week was Halloween. And the priest was going to Transylvania for Halloween. And it had been a childhood dream of his to go to Transylvania on Halloween. So he went to Transylvania on Halloween. So, yeah, we're like directly on the same trajectory as far as how we're moving into this line of thought. I think what may be a little different is you and I both, I had some stuff come up in my life and I stepped away and then I got back involved, and it was like, it was continuously pulling on me. I never stopped reading or listening or studying. And so, it just kept pulling me in. Since about 2019, I started talking about responsibility and how liberty is so dependent on responsibility. And around that same time that I began talking about that, I began hearing Jordan Peterson pop up talking about purpose, a higher meaning. Though he wasn't talking specifically about religion, he was using Christianity as kind of like the outline for the subjects so that he could like kind of analogize to what it was saying. And so I began to pay much more attention to religion whenever I was hearing it from his Jungian perspective, as opposed to the Protestant perspective I had heard growing up as a child. And as I leaned into responsibility and began to see purpose and how purpose and responsibility overlap, I began to realize that the liberty I was seeking was not going to be found in the ways I was seeking it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. You mean like let me see if this is what you mean, in the classically libertarian sense, where the world that you and I were probably used to?
I think it's like more, I think personally for me, honestly, I think I had more of a Gnostic worldview. That the more information I took in, the more prepared I was to be free.
I would kind of call that and I don't want to say classical liberal, but classical libertarian. That is what it seems to me like there is a lot of Gnostic elements within libertarianism, because you have this feel of, look, I know all of these theories by Rothbard and Hoppe, and if we can all apply them, I know these things. You guys don't realize it yet, but if you do realize these things, I know it can work, and we can all be free, and we'll all be happy. There was that element in my mind.
Yeah. I guess I'm careful not to apply my own failings and my own readings of things onto other people, even though I'm sure there are many other people that thought the exact same way I did. Like I'm not, and so you're probably more correct than I am. I just don't like to put what I'm thinking on others.
That's not very libertarian of you.
No, it's not.
Joking.
No, that's the only time a libertarian is an authoritarian is when you got to force that thought in their head.
Mm-hmm.
You got to shove their head into the mortar and pestle, and you got to grind that shit in there. And so, how has your view of liberty changed? I've kind of given you a description of like what I'm dealing with as far as my thoughts, and as you can tell, they're not fully formed. I'm kind of fleshing this out as we go. I'm still working through these things as to what's going on in my head, because my body, my lifestyle is moving in a direction that my head has not caught up with.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's weird because I don't even think I would use the term liberty anymore, but I guess you could. But it's possible that I was swimming in libertarian waters for so long that now that I've kind of got out of those waters and I'm on the sand entering other waters, that term still, and for some reason, and it shouldn't, but for some reason it still has kind of a negative connotation to it. Not the actual idea of liberty, but just that term. So I don't even think in those terms anymore. What am I free to do? Or what do I have the liberty to do? It's more like I still have liberty so far to do what I know I should do. And who knows how long that's going to be allowed. But so I look at it in those terms, like what I should do. It's almost like you said responsibility and liberty. Harry Brown, a long time ago, I remember, said that they're two sides of the same coin. And they are, but for some reason, I'm trying to focus on the responsibility side more than the liberty side. And in the past, I was focused more on the liberty side than the responsibility side, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And see, I looked at it as, let me see if I can explain this properly. I looked at it as they were not only two sides of the same coin, they were one and the same. Like, right. So it's part of the reason I started getting chickens. I started growing vegetables because I knew that the liberty I expected in my life depended on some sort of like being independent, self-sufficiency. Right. And I think it's part of the way I was raised. And that's part of the mindset that my parents ingrained in me, was this idea of self-sufficiency. You should always be independent and not turn to others. There's a sort of pride that you feed on whenever you know you can do for yourself, right? And you don't have to turn to someone else. And so therefore, no one can do anything to harm you and take anything away from you because you've earned everything and it's yours. You've done it, right? And so in my mind, because I grew up very poor as a child, we lived in government housing whenever I was young. We went years. My mom would go days without eating for years to make sure that my brother, myself, and my dad all had food.
Wow.
So we were used to this mentality that it was all on us. Every little like morsel was on us. And in that was for a long time, probably until I was 13, 14 years old. It was like that, and my parents had scrounged and saved and fought. My mom never got even a high school diploma and ended up working her way up through the workman's comp industry to making six figures a year.
Wow.
My dad worked lumber retail, and then he worked for two different construction companies building houses on the side. So he had basically three full-time jobs, when I was growing up. So it was like a very, like, you go out and you create for yourself type mentality that my parents had formed in me from a very young age. And so whenever I got into libertarianism, I was very attracted to the kind of the homesteading kind of side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And because I understood that that mentality of work, that hard work all the time, never stop. It's all on you. If a chicken dies, you better replace it with 3 other chickens because
Mm-hmm.
one of them's going to die, in the first week, that type deal. And just really understanding that hard work aspect. And it took a lot for me to relax. Anyway, I'm kind of going down this kind of crazy road, but so I never separated the two. And it was like, I don't know about for you, but for me, seeing kind of the rise, I don't know if it was a rise of it or if it was just brought to my attention because my audience started getting bigger and I became more aware of it. But the rise in the libertine ideals,
yeah,
really turned me off.
yeah.
As soon as it felt like it like amplified. I don't know if I'm off there, but for me, it was more obvious. It was more in my face.
That's interesting. Well, it wasn't only in my face, but this is prior to my podcast, I should say, probably 10 years prior. But it wasn't just in my face, it was me. And so to invert the freedom and responsibility that you were discussing, mine was a much more perverse, I would look back now with a slight embarrassment, say not as wholesome version of it. I thought I had the good job. There was a time where I was single. And so
time out, foxandsonscoffee.com. I'm sorry.
That's my favorite. Yeah.
Steve,
every morning.
Steve's awesome. It got a little chilly here today, so I started drinking it in the afternoon. Sorry, go ahead.
There was a time where I thought, so my responsibility was taken care of in the fact that I had a very good career. I owned a house, and it's like, hey, those adult things are done. Now you have the freedom and liberty to do the libertine things, whatever you want to do. And Austin, Texas offers plenty of that.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of years of taking care of the libertine aspect of freedom and liberty, which when you're in your 20s and 30s, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it was fun. Even then, when I was younger, there were times when it kind of drove me into the ground a little bit where I'd just be exhausted. And it's like, I can't keep, and this is a lot. I'm burning, as they say, the candle at both ends type of thing. So it's interesting. You grew up with such a struggle, and that responsibility led to your liberty to some extent. And mine, I mean, I didn't grow up wealthy, but we were very poor early on, and then it got better. And then once I started, it's very young for someone at 21 to start a pretty good career, and your brain's not even fully developed yet. But here I had all like this, what I thought was like decent money coming in, my own house, and Austin, Texas was my playground. And so, yeah, that it felt like I took care of the responsible part. I did what my parents said. I got a career at a young age. And then I thought, well, I can do all of these things. And I did all of those things. So that's the libertine that carried me through my 20s for sure. And then into my early 30s. And then even when I had first met Brittany, both of us were kind of on a libertine train, if you will. And so even the first several years of our relationship was quite wild.
Do you think, and I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to ask, because you kind of were involved in that lifestyle. Did it become, was it a bigger deal? Was it amplified? Did it become more popular? Or was it always there?
I was swimming in it. I don't even, to me, it was the existence of, it was my default. So I don't know if it became more popular. When you live in Austin, it is what it is. That's just, that's the environment. It's the default setting of Austin, Texas. And I was elbows deep, if not eyeballs deep in it, for quite some time. So it's not even to me that it wasn't popular or became popular. It just was that.
Yeah, I just kind of saw it become like it seemed like, lack of a better word, degeneracy just became okay all over the place. You know what
That's
I'm
true.
saying?
Yeah.
It was like nobody was saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't live that way." At least before, there were people that would like stand up and say, "Well, morally that's incorrect. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that, but I'm not going to judge you for it. Like I'm still going to love you despite you doing these things." But then it just became like, well, that's just who they are. That's what they do. Like this is, and it just became okay and like more in your face. At least that's how it felt for me.
Well, it certainly is now for sure. And so, I try to think, is it me that changed? Is it them, quote unquote, them that changed, or is it both? Is one a reaction to the other? I'm not sure where I fall on that yet, but certainly, I mean, a scroll through social media now, or a stroll down 6th Street in Austin, Texas, it's
6 years.
way different than it was even 10 years ago. And so I would say certain degeneracy is not only more popular, I would say it's being pushed as what's correct, what's the right way to be. The whole don't judge, they like to use um, Christian terminology and then warp it a little bit. Well, not a little bit. They warp it a lot. Love, judgment, and things like that. And they'll say, well, you can't judge. Love is love and all of this thing. And it's like, how far can they push this?
Mm,
And then, of course, the trap is for us to use the exact same demonic energy and push it from the opposite wing, which is a trap. But yeah, I mean, that part, you're right, is way more common now. I mean, it's now that the default setting that existed in 2010, let's say, when the furthest, this isn't the perverse aspect of society, but the furthest edgy things you had were the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. I mean, that's nothing now. That's not even, that would be almost mainstream at this point. And so that's the political aspect of it. To have a drag show, and not to sound like a boomer and bring up this old topic, but to have a drag show in front of like 6-year-olds, and even 2010 would be absolutely, you'd be shut down immediately. And now it's like, how dare you even judge that? That's love,
yeah.
So certainly that stuff's much more ubiquitous. That's the crazy edge of perversity is kind of the default setting.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I saw it starting to happen, and I really saw it creeping into libertarianism, I guess in like 2019.
Yeah, well, libertarianism is ripe for it. I mean, it's creeping into Presbyterian churches and Methodist churches, and that shouldn't be a ripe setting for it, but it turns out maybe it is. Libertarianism is certainly a ripe setting for it. They look at people like Tom Woods, who I would consider like a very wise, squared away libertarian, and they're like, the guy's a Nazi or something. He doesn't want drag queen story hour, right?
Mm,
So that tells you how far that's gone.
yeah. Yeah. But I think I saw that like creeping into at least my perspective, like around 2019. And then we had the coof and the lockdowns and all that. And all these things, like it just, the paradigm that I had, that I was looking, the glasses I was looking through, the lens I was seeing the world through, just shattered. And it was like, what is liberty then? Like, if all these things can happen, if you can change the definition, if you can change the label of pedophile to MAPS, which sounds just so innocuous,
Right.
and you can make it sound like it's just a normal sexual activity that people fantasize about.
Oh.
And then you have all these lockdowns, and you have social media just shutting out voice after voice after voice after voice at the behest of the government. And you didn't have to wait for these Twitter files to come out to see that this was happening.
Right.
It was quite obvious from the get-go. Shit, CBS released an article in 2009 talking about social media as a tool of the intelligence agencies.
Right.
We knew that all this funding was flowing straight through the intelligence agencies. So all these libertarians saying, "Oh, well, it's a private company, bro." It's like,
Right.
since when? When has it
Right.
ever been a private company? Right. And so you see all these things happening, and my whole paradigm just shattered. It was just like,
Yeah.
okay,
Right.
hold on. What does it actually mean to be a free human being?
Yeah. So a lot of that, in my opinion, has to do with creeping leftism taking over not only institutions, but organizations, groups, because that's kind of what it does. It's a supremacist movement, so to speak. And it had crept so far into, I mean, it crept into libertarianism way long ago. If you read those early Rothbard Rockwell reports, Murray Rothbard and Lou Rockwell were talking about it, and that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And so when Pat Buchanan kind of rose up to the Republican Party those years, so they saw it back then. Imagine if Murray Rothbard were alive now, and I already know Lou Rockwell's feelings on the libertarian movement. So, yeah, I think the libertarian movement was kind of weakened in a state because it had been taken over by social leftists. And so that then the garden is ripe for this craziness to move right in. It kind of goes back to that, it's escaping my mind, the such and such law, where anything not explicitly right will be taken over by the left.
Oh,
But
yeah. I know.
these days, I think even if it's explicitly right, it's going to be taken over by the left. We shall see. But the libertarian field was ripe for that kind of stuff to sink in and plant its roots and then start growing. And then it allows people that say, nope, this is who I am. I am a libertarian no matter what. Then you're kind of stuck in this corner of saying, well, I do defend private property. And again, you have to be ignorant to the fact that Facebook and Twitter and all of these social media companies had so much NGO, but which we know is not really in the non-government part of it. They had so much funding from these agencies and so much infiltration. They're not truly a private company. But if you don't know that and you don't understand that, you are kind of stuck in this small corner of like, but it's a private company. And then you're hit with this decision. Am I going to be a pure libertarian and promote property rights? Or do I wake up and go, okay, this stuff's insane. This is ruining society. And maybe I am not a libertarian. There's this inner battle that a lot of us had to go through. And I think with the post-libertarian movement, that created a lot of waves at the time that happened. But yeah, you can't, when things get worse and worse and worse, you have to kind of, I'm a firefighter, and if we go in with plan A, and that always has worked for decades, plan A has worked. And then we get in this situation, it's like, uh-oh, things are falling around us, things are crumbling. This is going to shit really quickly. You don't just go, well, I'm stuck on plan A, so we're going to just see how this works out. You have to kind of revisit the plan, maybe reformulate your thoughts, and then try something different. And so I think maybe that's what you did. I think that's really what led us, even if it was not directly, I think that's what led us into Orthodoxy. It certainly had something to do with it, in my opinion.
I've tried to explain this to my wife because she's asked me. My wife is atheist, and so we have these really in-depth conversations about how I ended up where I am. And I was talking to my priest and some people about this a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was, and it's just funny that reading politics led me to religion.
Yeah.
I mean, in all actuality,
Mm-hmm.
just seeing the reality around me, I started digging into the books of like H.G. Wells and Yuval Noah Harari and people like this that are like globalists. And it put me in a position where I had to choose between the material and the spiritual. And I made a choice. And by researching and digging through these works, I found truth in the opposition to these works, right?
Right.
It wasn't a conscious choice for me. A lot like you, I was agnostic. I was kind of like, yeah, whatever, man. How could anybody ever know anything when it comes to thousands of years ago? Like, what are we talking about? And that was always my point of view on it. And this is why I'm so big when we chat with people. You and I chat with people that aren't Orthodox. I'm so big on, you just have to experience it. There's nothing I'm going to say.
Right.
There's nothing that's going to replace that. That's going to act in, as there's just no way I'm going to explain it in a way that's going to make any sense to you. I know the first time I ever went to a liturgy, and I recorded with Justin Campbell that night afterwards. And I just remember saying, I don't know. There was something there. It was something. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to figure this out because there's something that happened. And it is like, you nailed it when I don't remember. I think you were talking to Father Turbo, and you said the first time you read Father Seraphim Rose,
God's Revelation of the Human Heart.
Thank you. I could not remember the name of the book, and it used to be sitting right here, and it's not there right now. And I'm like, wait, I'm lost. Yes, you said you got that feeling like right there, and that's what it was. And I still get it. Every liturgy, I get it. Every single one. And it's like, yeah, there's something real about that. Like if you ask me if I feel something in liturgy, I'll probably tell you no, because it's not feel as an emotion. And I've run into this with my wife, like talking to her about it. And she asked me, she's like, how'd you end up where you're at? And I was like, I was looking for truth and I found it. And that's all I can tell you. And if you're not looking, you're either it's going to find you, and it's going to be very uncomfortable when it does, or you're going to miss it completely.
Yeah, I've had this saying about it that I don't like, but it makes sense in my mind, is it's not for everybody. But that's not true, because it is for everybody. But I think I'm trying to recraft that, and it's like, it's not for everybody in this exact moment.
Yeah, right now.
Right. It's not for everybody right now, because I remember when I was on Thad's show talking about this, I said, once I discovered it, I thought, why didn't someone show me this? Like, where's this been? Why didn't someone tell me about this years and years ago? And then later I thought, because I wouldn't have been ready for it, or wouldn't have been interested in it. And how horrible would that have been if someone exposed me to it 5 years ago and I said, nope, and let it just go past me and never revisit it again. What a failure, and that would be on my part. So it is for everybody, but it's not for everybody in this moment. So I, like you said, and I hear that all the time. Father Turbo says it, my priest says it. It's the experience, and it's not necessarily for some people an academic experiment or an academic discovery, although it also is that for people like you and me, because I'm sure you can look next to you, I can look next to me and see a stack of books that I still need to get through. Besides,
that's what I was just moving a second ago, because it looked like it was going to fall over. I'm like,
yeah, because that stuff is fun if you are someone who likes to think and read about certain. I mean, there's thousands of years of literature, so why wouldn't that not be fascinating? But they tell me quite often at church, the leaders do not get bogged down in the academic stuff within Orthodoxy. It's so easy to do, especially for new people, especially for males for whatever reason. And quit arguing. We've talked about this in the group chat, and quit arguing with people about it online, especially if you're new. But even when you're old, Father Turbo doesn't go argue with people online, right? And so when you look at people that are very good examples and mentors, they don't argue with people online about it. And I remember on this, when I was on Thad's show too, he said, do you have any interest now in arguing the existence of Christ with someone? And I couldn't have said no faster.
Yeah.
I don't.
No.
If someone doesn't want to believe it or doesn't want to believe the traditions or whatever, I'm cool.
Okay.
Doesn't
Sure.
Cool. I hope that one day they do. And if that doesn't happen, and my dad told me this too, when I was going through my issues with Brittany. You can't force someone into this. There's your part, there's the other person's part, and there's God's part. You do your part, and I can look at that, and you can look at that as like, we put this material out in the world so people can see it and hear it and take it in. Then there's two other parts that need to happen, and we can't control those other two parts. And someone in my clergy also told me once, and this has stuck with me, you can't argue someone into heaven, but you can certainly argue them out. And what he meant by that is, if you shouldn't be trying to argue someone that your religion, your Christianity, your truth is the right thing to do if they're arguing with you about it, because you're going to come off as pushy and argumentative. And rather than go, you know what, he's argued me right into this, I'm totally accepting it, you're probably going to push them away, and then you've shut the door.
And if you're doing it on social media, you're probably not only pushing them away, you're probably pushing away several others. Correct.
And that goes back to that thing where, well, you should argue with someone in the comments because it's not really for them, it's for everyone else that sees it. But this is for whatever reason, this is such a personal topic that it's not like just saying drug laws or something where people can kind of take it or leave it. Religion is so personal that when you're rude and argumentative about it, more people are going to go, see, it's not helping that guy. And they say it helps people. They say it makes them, like we talked about in the group chat today, it makes them more humble or more this or that. It's not making him that way. So that's not right. That's not true. And that's an issue I think that's facing I'd say the Christian community at large, but certainly the online ortho community can be certainly contentious at points.
What I try to remember is that if you're trying to be a teacher, or you promote yourself to that, elevate yourself to that status of teacher, and that's what you are putting yourself in the position to be, then you are going to be judged for all the souls that you affect.
Correct.
And I'm not interested in that.
No.
I'm not interested in having that impact on people.
Right. I'm okay with putting information out there, and it's not me doing it. It's my platform doing it. And if someone writes me after an interview with Father John Whiteford or Father Turbo, and then they say, that was a great interview, I'm interested, where should I look for a church? Totally cool. But I'm certainly not going to go, well, now you need to believe this, and here's the dogmas, you better follow, like that's the furthest thing. And my priest and I were talking one night, and he was talking about confession and his spiritual guidance for
just as an example. I was chrismated on Christmas Eve, and this is a book called The Dogmas of the Church. I don't think I'm going to teach you that in a discussion online. So,
and even if you were to just say, well, read this book, no one's going to say, oh, well, I disagree with everything Tommy says, but I'll read this 800-page book. Right?
Exactly.
And my priest, so to what I was saying, he said, it's a lot of pressure on me when I hear a confession and someone's looking for spiritual guidance. I mean, this is their soul we're talking about here. This will affect them for eternity. He's like, I have to really think about what I say and the advice I give and the direction I lead people in, because that's pressure.
Yeah. And Confession, man. Whenever I first started going to the church, the idea of confession was one of those things that I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
You know, like, why am I going to sit and tell somebody else like all the weird crap that goes on in my head?
And especially when you know them.
Yeah. And it's like, imagine how this guy's going to look at me after this, right?
Mhm.
And then you do it and you're like, "Oh, that's why you do that."
Mhm.
You know? And immediately, the first thing I thought was, why did they stop the public confession in front of the church? Feels so amazing. It is such a relief to get that off of your shoulders.
Mhm. I
And
haven't done it yet because I'm still a catechumen. But for a long time, to your point, I thought, I don't know, man. Like I
yeah.
know my priest is my friend. Um, and we were driving one night, him and I, and he was talking about again confession, and he was giving some example, and he said, Father, I this week I had dirty thoughts about some females, and I started laughing, and I was like, dirty thoughts? That's something we got to confess to you? And he's like, well, I mean, not necessarily. It depends how you feel about it, if it's weighing on you. And I was like, well, you'll get an earful. But yeah, and now I get it, because it's not only getting it off your shoulders, it's keeping you in line. And that sounds, I mean, my old libertarian self would cringe, like, keeping you in line. That's the man. And I've heard, and this is not a knock on Protestants, but I have heard Protestants say, you're confessing to a man. That's not the same thing, not understanding how it works. But it keeps you, when you have to go to on a weekly basis, or some people do it monthly, whatever the case, and admit these things you do. I can already imagine, before you do them in real life, gives you a little pause, like, do I really want to do this? Is it worth it in the moment to go and tell, quote unquote, my friend, my priest, my spiritual father, whoever, that I did this? Is that worth it? And so naturally, there's things we just do instinctively, unfortunately, like a little white lie here, where you say, well, I was going to call you back, but I got busy. And it's like, no, I didn't. I just want to ignore you, or something like that. But I mean, bigger things, where a spouse cheating, or I don't know, something at work that's dishonest. And, these aren't things I do, but I'm trying to think of something that could scare the average person. But I certainly think certain behaviors could be curbed by knowing that you are going to have to tell someone that you did this.
Yeah, there's that, I guess. I don't know. I don't even think about it that way. What I found myself doing a lot is asking during prayer, is asking to be shown what I need to confess.
Mm.
Because I mean, when we got on here, part of what I wanted to talk about was finding true liberty. And man, I mean, you know a lot more about my story than most people do. So like you'll kind of get this, but like there was such a weight lifted off of me. And it was like, it's like that first time you like do a drug, you
Yeah.
get that really high and you're always chasing that high. It was like that. It was like, okay, I want to get it all out.
Mm-hmm.
How much lighter would I be? How much better would I feel? How much younger would I look?
Yeah.
How much of a spring in my step would there be
If you weren't carrying this weight.
exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really hard to identify what the weight is.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting way to put it. I hadn't thought about that yet. And I want to ask you a question after I give this example, but I know this is I don't know if we can curse. I
Go
think your
ahead.
mom watches this. I don't want to disappoint her.
Fuck
But
her.
but it's gonna face the bitch of me. But I watched the show Yellowstone, and I was watching it last night, and this character in it, Beth, says to her husband, she says, I had thoughts that were disturbing me. Do you think about us when we were younger? And he goes, I think about today and I think about tomorrow. And she goes, well, I think about yesterday. And he goes, that's where all the pain is. That's why I don't do it. And so to your point, it's your past, right? You're not the weight on you isn't the stuff that's in the moment. It's certainly, hopefully not the stuff that's in your future, although that's a thing, but it's the things that you did in your past that kind of bog you down, and they cloud your soul, your third eye, however you want to call it. And so, yeah, I could imagine getting those off of your chest. Did you do a life confession?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like, it wasn't like sitting there with like a novel and reading.
Yeah.
But
mine would be bigger than that book you just showed.
Right. Yeah. No. But I mean, I think the point is to repent.
Correct. Right.
And so it's not about what you're saying or in the moment. And people have a kind of a perverse view of what confession is. But in all actuality, I mean, you're veiled. And when I say veiled, I go to an Antiochian. So the priest actually puts something over you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you're veiled and it's dark in that moment. And it's not just confession like you would see in a movie.
Right.
It's you also talk about other things too. You would talk about, let's say there was something someone did to you when you were 4 years old that has stuck with you or something like that, right? Like you would bring that up, like this, I'm holding on to this. So why is this pain here? What is this? And the priest, like, and what you're doing is you're taking that off of you and you're giving that pain. All right. You know, the parable of, the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way it was explained to me is the Good Samaritan is Jesus. The inn that he brings the injured person to is the church.
Yes.
The innkeeper is the priest, right? So that priest, he's there as a representative of Christ in order for you to give this to, so that he presents it. It's kind of the same reason that during liturgy, the priest has their back to us almost the entire time. Right. They're taking on the weight of the church, just as the man of the house would take on the weight of the household, you know, kind of that situation. So when you begin to view it through that lens and form that relationship, then you begin to see a little bit more about what's happening and feel how the sacraments actually work, and experience how they work and understand how they work.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's that you often hear the fullness of Christianity is what you experience within Orthodoxy, as opposed to, let's say, other denominations. But what you just said is part of that fullness, because you would never experience that anywhere else. I mean, they do have confession within Catholicism, but it's a different process. And for one, the fact that you can't see the person, they're behind a screen, you know, but yeah, that's part of the fullness. And so I think that experience, again, I have not done it, but now it keeps going through my head. Like I'm trying to picture myself. Now I watch others do it when I'm there every Sunday. And there's a site on St. Seraphim Holland's Church in McKinney, Texas. I cannot think of the website, but it teaches you how to confess, and I think that's very helpful too.
Yeah,
But
that's interesting.
that
I
is
thought it,
something that, as an outsider coming in, at first I was like, that seems weird to me. And then I even had this stupid demonic thought process, like, you probably don't have to tell them everything that you did that week. But I mean, what are you doing if you're not, right? That's like saying before the Eucharist, like, oh, I just had breakfast, I'm good. But you're not truly readying yourself for the Eucharist. So, which is why you're there. Why are you cheating yourself out of such an experience, right? You wouldn't go to a ayahuasca ceremony in some island, and when they tell you to fast, then you're not going to go, well, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat a bunch of chips. It's like, well, no, I can't do that. This is important. Well, if that's important to you, and it would be to me if I were to be in that setting, this is so much bigger than that. So this has to be more important.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I, the more I gripped and grasped for that autonomous liberty,
Mm-hmm.
the more I found that solitude was not really what I was looking for.
As opposed to community?
Yes. Because I would talk about liberty, liberty, liberty. I have to do this, and I'm responsible for this and that and the other, out of one side of my mouth, and then out of the other side of my mouth, I would be talking about recreating the extended family, like forming that tribe and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, where did these things connect?
That's a
And
good point.
and I think through the church and experiencing the church, I found that connection.
Mm-hmm. It's the best community I've been a part of. And I also told this to Thad, like the word community a few years ago.
Scary.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like I would have said, no, I don't want a community. I've always been kind of an open and friendly person, and I like being social, but just the word community, just like it was like nails on a chalkboard almost. But really, this church, and who knows, there could be people that go to other churches where they're like, no, well, mine's a community too, and it's not Orthodox. And there could be Orthodox people going, mine doesn't feel like a community. I don't know. And mine's in a small town, and the church is probably 800 square feet, and there's maybe 40 of us, which feels that can fill up an 800 square foot building pretty tightly.
Yeah.
And the trapeza afterwards, when at first I was like, I'm not going to stick around for this, and I would leave. But now, like, I hang out, you talk to people, and it's a fascinating thing. And the realization of, even though we're all a little bit different, we're all here for the same thing. It's like a common bond in Misery Loves Company, almost like the Merle Haggard song. Like, you're all there, and you realize we all have this sickness, and we're trying to get better, and we're doing it in a way that takes a bit of a physical toll, spiritual toll, and mental toll at some points on us. Not all the time, but at certain points. But to be able to understand that we all have that, and you're relating to people, and then of course we all have, similar political ideas and where the world's going. So it helps to bond over certain things like that too. Mm-hmm. And then you turn around, and it's like, wow, I actually have a tight-knit community here before I even realized it. And at first I almost wanted to eschew it. Like, no, I'm good. I'm an individual. Have fun, guys. I'm going back home. And that's not the way to approach it, in my opinion. Now it was, it's what I thought was right early on, but yeah, it hits you. And it's like, this is the actual community that I was looking for without realizing it.
Right. Yeah. There's, it's almost as if you were to take the libertarian ideology and just fill in that atheistic gap, you would almost form the Orthodox Church out of that. Like, it's almost it's so similar, it's so familiar.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there is some familiarity, and as long as you were, I would say, the right-leaning libertarian, because But of course, then that might take the libertine aspect out of it, and or the atheist aspect, as you said. But the respect for hierarchy's got to be there, because that's what the church is.
Yeah, I don't even know if I was completely there with the respect for hierarchy when I first went.
No, I wasn't either.
I understood like hierarchy, and part of that's because I hung out with some motorcycle clubs,
Yeah.
here and there. So I almost prospected with one, and so I kind of understood like what hierarchy, how it worked, and
I've used that analogy, by the way, before. Like catechumens, like being a prospect.
It very much is, yeah. And plus I was in the military, so and that might be a real reason why I got turned off by hierarchy. It's like, so but so I didn't really have an issue adapting to the hierarchy, other than I was resistant just voluntarily engaging with it. And but once you understand why it's there and what it's there for, how it helps you, it's one of the things we talked about, I'm sure you talked about it just as much as I did. I know I talked about it a lot early in the days of my podcast, was the left definition of freedom and the right's definition of freedom, and how they were so in opposition, right? The left's views not being responsible for bills and not not having to worry about these
landlords, bro.
Right. They view that as freedom. You're free to do, casual things, whatever they may be, and engage in experiences. Whereas the right views the responsibility of working and creating for yourself and being your own master as the ultimate freedom. And this really is, as Father Seraphim Rose described it, somewhere in between. It's this royal path. You're walking this very narrow path, and you're looking left and right. You're like, yeah, they ain't quite got it. They ain't quite got it. And you're trying to see where the commonalities are, so you can just kind of plant a seed here and there.
That's right.
But walking that tightrope is really difficult, and you have to voluntarily engage in that tightrope, or you're going to fall off one way or the other.
Yes, well put. The royal path. Father Turbo would be proud of what you just said. I think when you said the commonalities from each side, in my experience so far, and the way I can see it, is those are actually the good parts. And sometimes where they differ is the negative energy, and it's almost the mirror opposite, right? Where they differ. So I always use the example of how pride is the mirror opposite of humility. Oftentimes, and of course we know humility is good and pride's not, but if you just take left wing and right wing, let's for simplicity, they can have the inversion of each other, but there's still a demonic energy just shown a mirror, if that or seen through opposite lens, if that makes sense. Whereas the good parts from each side, they're the same. They're good and they're good. But this, like, you're so bad that I'm going to be the opposite of you, but also very bad, is that's a demonic energy, and it's just a negative feedback loop at some point. And again, it causes revolutions, which we know are circular, and one just leads to the other, back to the other. And so that's the kind of stuff I think the royal path is trying to keep you from falling into.
Well, it cuts your horseshoe in half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you got the horseshoe theory. And why do totalitarian regimes on each side look so similar?
Yeah. And they hate each other. They act like they hate each other because they're so different. And it's like, not that different.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason they look so similar is because when you start going to the right or the left in any direction, you're to any degree, you're going to end up at this place where you're if you're not confronting true evil, you're probably representing it.
Correct. Yes. And just for listeners' sake, because this conversation can easily get misrepresented. I don't think Tommy, and I know I'm not, politically, I'm not saying be a centrist, man. And that's the way to be politically.
Yeah, man, be Tim Pool.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's not what we're saying. This is a spiritual matter, but you can use political jargon with it, and I think it works.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about you. Maybe this is just what's happened with me because of my experience. I find the political so much less interesting.
Yeah, same.
And
because if you can look past that, because we can all see that there's something other than that that's above it, it feels like you're just doing surface level things rather than like you're playing in the kiddie pool, where if you look over there, like where there's a giant pool with a real deep end.
yeah,
I'm not sure that I want to just sit in the shallow waters at this point.
yeah, I want to get on the high dive.
Yeah, and jump into the deep part. Now I'm learning how to swim. But you can talk about the shallow waters with the deep waters undergirding what's really going on, I think.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's been something I've been trying to balance, that I've been wrestling with, is that I can't even focus my attention on the political anymore. It just matters so little to me. When I look at it, all I see is nonsense.
Yeah, it's wild. I say my favorite show, I guess if you're talking strictly hours watched, it probably would have been, but I watched Tucker pretty loyally every night except when I was at work, and I haven't watched Tucker in a month or something like that. And I keep thinking about maybe I need to catch up and see what's going on, and I don't really care that much.
Every time I turn one on, it's like 5 minutes. I turn it off, and I
Yeah,
go like Orthodox ethos or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes I'll watch the intro segment, and then it's like, then I go to YouTube and watch stuff on there.
Yeah. I've just gotten so disinterested with these things, because what I've found is maybe you found something different. And if you need to go, we're at an hour. Just let me know if you need to go.
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah, I got to go watch Tucker. Just kidding.
What I've found is that as I've kind of dug more into the Orthodox mindset and gotten more involved in the way that they describe the world, and even politically, I mean, I have some political books by Orthodox writers too. And as I dig more into that, I'm so much less interested in what is like, especially the day-to-day occurrences.
Right.
I find them so less important, because I found that the liberty that I was looking for is not to be found in the politics of man.
Correct. Yeah. That's once you have that realization, it makes walking away from the strictly political world pretty easy. And it's one of those things. It's like if you were in a relationship that's not going well and you think, well, I don't want to leave this because then I'll be all alone. And then all of a sudden, like, you fall in love with something else. And it's like, oh yeah, okay. That wasn't as fun, the thing I was into. And now it's easier for me to leave. By the way, anyone listening, that is not an analogy of my life right now. It's just an example I'm using. But yeah, the mundane politics of day to day. And it's funny, I even started thinking about who's going to run in 2024. And then I even found that thought, like, I don't know that I care that much about that. I might when it comes closer to time, and I might entertain the idea of doing episodes on it. But right now, you turn on the news and you see the same faces, the same senators, the same reps, the same president. And it's just, I don't care.
Yeah, it's well, and they seem to get stupider by the day.
Yeah, there is that.
it's like I get nothing out of it, right? It doesn't, whether I'm listening to Tucker or Tim Pool or Rachel Maddow, or I know I'm just getting fed a line from
Yeah.
all of them,
Yeah.
right? And the one place I know I can go and I can find truth, and no matter what the consequences, no matter what, is I can go to the church, I can talk to the people of the church, I can bring up these issues, and I can see them in person roll their eyes.
Mhm.
They don't care. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, most people don't care. Like, one of the things that my podcast revolved around was creating a diary that my children could go back and listen to and learn where my mind was at. Is my mind in a place that is going to assist them moving forward? Well, I just got in a conversation with my son, my youngest son, the other day. He's graduating this year. And he was like, oh, yeah, I listen to your podcast every week. I've been trying to like fill myself in on politics and yada, 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 because I'm going to graduate and I'm going out into the world. And I think I should know this stuff. And I was like, look, listen to Counterflow, listen to the Marc Clair show. You're probably going to get more out of those podcasts than you do out of mine. And when I said it, I realized, okay, I probably need to do something different with the way that I'm conducting my show if I feel that way. Right. And so I just I feel like it's important, and it's something I did early on. And Pete always told me early on he liked this about what I was doing with my podcast, was that I would get like intimate with my own thoughts, my own feelings, like my own personal life. I would reveal things about myself in my shows that you would not know unless you were someone who was close to me. And he was like, I really like that personal touch you had on there. And I feel like at some point I got away from that a little bit. And
Mhm.
I want to bring that back. I want to bring kind of that little tidbits. Like, you don't have to know every little detail about me. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to make you uncomfortable, but well, I
Yeah.
might, but it's like not intentionally. But I feel like there's that personal touch that I have an ability to bring to a show that not everybody has that ability.
Yeah, that I agree. I agree with Pete, and I agree with you about that. And yeah, you're not going to make them uncomfortable. It won't be your show won't be your confession booth. Um, but that's very kind of you to tell your son to listen to my show. That's an interesting thought too, and because mine, for one, wasn't I didn't change on purpose,
Mm.
and I didn't sit and think, "Yep, time to change directions." Just not. I just didn't. I mean, I guess I kind of did when it became Counterflow because Thad and I were working together on that. But I know it's taken a slight turn into Orthodoxy. That was not by design. It just kind of, I talk about things I like to talk about, and that's what my world is right now. So yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that though for my future. Like, if I were to have a kid, I think if I were to say it like you, I want to leave a diary behind of what I was thinking, and what if they wanted to look back on their dad once I passed away, or things that might help them. I think now I am in a good spot for that. So I think I would feel comfortable with that description for the current format. So that I love the way you describe that though. That's cool.
I agree with you. I think you are too. And that's why I tell my kids to go listen to you, you know. Um, it's not that I don't want them to hear what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I want them, I wanted to see I had two uncles on each side of my family die in their early 40s before they were 45. And so my mom's younger brother and my dad's younger brother both died by the age of 44 of
Oh,
cancer of some sort. So when I started my podcast, it was a lot along the lines of when I bought this property and started raising chickens and stuff. Like, it was a legacy. It was something I could leave to my kids. It was like, because because for a lot of their lives, due to divorce and my job, I was separated from them. I didn't have the opportunity to
Yeah, you're always
always
on the
go
road.
see them.
Yeah.
I didn't always have the opportunity to spend weekends with them and see them. So it was like, I want you to know what you never knew about me.
That's really sweet.
The way I thought, the people I talked to, the conversations I was interested in having, the subjects I was interested in looking at. I wanted that diary, that file available for you. And I was driving down the road the other day, man, and it really kind of choked me up for a second, because I was like, I'm in a situation, because driving truck is a very dangerous job. It's one of the top 5 most dangerous jobs in America. And I was for some reason it popped into my head, like, any day at work I could die. I'm on highways on a forklift unloading a truck with traffic zooming by me at 75, 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Any moment something bad could happen. And for some reason this came to my mind, and I was like, how many widows can say that they have 400 episodes of material they can go back and listen to their dead husband discuss in detail ideas and thoughts and feelings and and I was like, wow, I'm not only leaving this for my kids, I'm leaving this for my wife too.
Mhm.
And that like really like stopped me. It was like I never thought about it that way, but
Mhm.
it really stopped me.
Yeah, that is, by the way, my job's fairly dangerous, but I've always said the most dangerous part of our job is not going into a house fire. It's our work on the freeways when this traffic is just zooming by you, and you kind of have it blocked off with one fire truck, but there's still a lane, and we're reaching into people's cars and pulling them out and doing all these things, and it's just like you're saying. And I've always thought, like, if one guy, or probably more likely one lady, looks down and isn't paying attention, and boom, we're out. We are done.
Mhm.
But I guess someone would have, I don't know, 252 episodes to go back and hear some of my thoughts.
Yeah, well, and then all the shows you've been on as well.
Yeah,
So,
they can come on they can come hear these too.
yeah. I'll
This
make
is a
sure.
depressing way to end it.
Oh, well, I wasn't planning on ending it quite
Okay.
yet. Are you
Okay,
ready
good.
to go?
No. Okay. We have to go on. We have to bring it up to a fun high note too.
Yeah, no. So in this, like, I'm working, like I said, I'm working through these things. I'm kind of like, I'm still just kind of like fumbling through these ideas in my head, the way all these things work, and all these thoughts that I've expressed. And I feel like I've talked a lot more than you, even though I'm supposedly interviewing you. But the way that these thoughts have progressed, it's I feel like more at peace, more free than I ever have in my life.
Yes.
And what created this feeling is, as Saint Silouan says, is binding myself to something greater.
Yeah. Yes. Rather than an idea of I can do what I want.
Yeah, but because when you do what you want, what you find yourself doing is becoming a slave to a vice.
Correct. Yes. That I told Thad that too. That's such a massive, I guess, red pill, we can call it, once that hits you. And it's like, in the libertine years, just leave me alone, man. I can do whatever I want. And well, I did. And like I said earlier on, even when I was agnostic and in the midst of doing whatever I wanted, even then it was like burnout after, I don't know, a few months. I remember times thinking, I just want to sleep alone. But I'm 20 something, and it kept happening. And it's just like, you become, yeah, it's like a slave to the grind, no pun intended, and a different sort. And there's nothing, everything in that life is fulfilling in the moment rather than fulfilling uh, long term, because it's zero long term. It's all completely skin deep, no pun intended again. It's all completely surface level. And then once that's over, that moment of fun or that night of wild being high or being drunk or whatever, then you kind of crash a bit the next day. And I remember even doing ecstasy and things like that. And it's so fun in the moment. And that it gives you hours of like amazing sensations, and you love it. And then comes what they call the terrible Tuesdays, because your brain's been zapped of dopamine and now it lacks it. And so your chemicals, you're imbalanced, not only spiritually, but certainly chemically in your brain. And it leaves this like empty feeling. And then it hits you like, that was all for fun in the moment. And the Orthodox thing is almost the opposite. Now, I have joy in the moment when I'm in the liturgy, and I really, really like being there. But you're doing all of this to stack up a long stretch of time where it starts to maintain like a healthy spiritual feeling. And again, it's not always joyful because there is a struggle to it. But within the struggle, much like the workout again, I love being in the workout moment when it's hard and it hurts your muscles when you're pushing this stuff up, and then you're done. And then it's like, I did it. And when you're done with orthodoxy in the moment, or lifting weights in the moment, there's not that gutted feeling where you're empty and you realize that was all for nothing. It's kind of the satisfaction of like, wow, now I'm finally onto something that's helpful, and it's helpful long term. And while the workout's certainly secular and physical and material, that's one thing. But when you're taking it beyond that to the spiritual realm, in my experience so far, it's just, I mean, it's amazing. And it's like, man, all of those wasted libertine years where I thought I was free and I could just do whatever. Now it's almost like restricting certain things that are in the moment and restricting certain physical pleasures is part of a larger enjoyment down the road. And you're not left with that empty feeling. You're left with like, I conquered something.
Yeah. Well, and conquest. So I had
Conquest law, which brings me back to that point I wanted to make earlier, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Conquest law. I think that's the one about if nothing explicit.
Oh, gotcha. All right. So a guy said to me the other day, he said, I've done every drug and drink you could think of in mankind. And I could out-drug and out-drink anybody. If you turn on Pornhub, you'll not see anything I've not done.
Oof. Gosh. Okay.
And I'm bored.
Oh.
There's no point in pursuing any of this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And he's atheist.
Oh.
And it's like, yeah, because you're trying to fill that void with the material.
Correct.
And it's not going to fill. Like, the one thing I've found is I brought it up earlier with heroin, but every drug you do, you're chasing that first experience.
Yeah, right.
Every sexual experience you have, you're chasing that first experience.
Well, maybe not the first one, but yeah.
Maybe not exactly the first one. Maybe the first one with that person.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, right. But you're chasing something that is out of reach. And with orthodoxy, I can't tell you that every time you go to the liturgy, it's going to feel great. Sometimes there are going to be distractions. Sometimes things are going to feel off. You're going to be in a bad spot. Like maybe your mind's not there or whatever. But I can tell you that week, during the week, it's going to push you through that week in a better place than you were in the week before. And it always gets better.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if I was listening to that book my dad sent me, and I had shared it in the group chat earlier with Rachel about theosis.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy makes a point. He says, yeah, sometimes you'll be in liturgy and you're looking around and people are talking and they're distracting you and you can't focus on the liturgy.
Yeah.
And he said, and you're thinking, well, I could be at home peacefully praying and be in complete peace. But that struggle, whatever you're going through at that moment, is that resistance that you're dealing with, is you're working that muscle, whatever
Yes,
muscle
correct.
that is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's easier next time and it gets better. And it's like working out,
Yes.
right? It's like when you start reading some of the stuff that you and I read, it's difficult at first. You're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is so. I still read Klaus Schwab and I'm like, this is so mind-numbingly boring.
Yeah.
Like I can barely make it through 2 pages without getting up and walking a lap around my house, like to wake myself up, because it's horrible. It's terrible. But what you're looking for is you're looking for that positive resistance that puts you in a place to where things keep getting better.
Yes.
And so if you're leaning on that drug or that alcohol or that sex or whatever it is, it's gonna become dull and numb to you. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be enough. At some point, it's not going to be enough. You're gonna have to up the ante somehow.
Yeah.
Like however you manage to do that. With Orthodoxy, the ante is upping you.
Correct.
You're being lifted up.
Yes. Yeah, that's an excellent way to put it. And I have a few points to tag on that. For one, that's why we see, in my opinion, certain elites when normies will say, "Oh my God, you really think these elites, for a cartoonish example, drink children's blood?" And it's like, or these Epstein experiences. It's like, well, yeah, because they're addicted to power. And they keep getting power, then they get more power, then they get more money, and it's like, what next? So they chase the next crazy high. But when you're at a certain level, the next crazy high, those are things that you and I can't even fathom, right?
Yeah, it's like the movie Hostel.
I've never seen this.
You've never seen the movie Hostel?
No, I'm a bad.
Oh my God, you got to watch it.
Okay.
All right. So it's about rich people that pay to murder people.
Bingo.
I mean, that's right. So these guys are traveling through Europe. They stay in a hostel.
Oh, I have seen this.
Coincidentally,
I
they
have seen
share
this.
the room with these hot chicks.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And these hot chicks like lure them in,
Yep.
and then they end up getting murdered
Yeah.
because these rich people have like set up this honey trap for tourists so they can get the rocks off.
Yes.
Yes, it's real. There's
Right.
a documentary out. I showed it to Beatrix, this documentary. I'll send it to you if you want me to. It's pretty wild. But it's about the Mothers of Darkness Castle in Belgium. And there are serial killers and government officials all tied to this cult in Belgium. And the government has openly paid to get serial killers out of jail, in order to fulfill their role and their allegiance to this cult.
Right. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking of. And the other thing I was going to say, I'm sure you and your audience are familiar with Ron Jeremy, the old porn actor. You know where he's at right now?
Old. I mean, that depends on your definition.
Right.
Old.
Well, he's either in or about to head to an insane asylum.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
He was great in Boondock Saints.
Yeah, that's funny. I had this discussion at work yesterday, and that's the first thing one of my guys said. But think of his life and what he's done, and the dark, and this is not a judgment, but I can imagine the darkness that's sitting upon his soul right now, and without any way, like you talked about, to get it off of your soul and
the inability to reach pleasure anymore.
Yeah, and he's either being committed or was committed. I was just having this discussion yesterday with someone at work that knew the story, but yeah, he is or will be in an insane asylum now.
Man,
The life of pleasure.
yeah. So, well, you have any? We're coming up on an hour and a half, so I'm going to let you go here pretty soon. You want to finish this off with any deep thoughts by Buck Johnson?
Oh man, I don't have too many deep thoughts. I had a thought and it died of loneliness. See, I have dad jokes out the wazoo. I would say for people listening to this, I hope that I understand there's let's see, a train, an ortho train running through the liberty sphere, if you will, like a pipeline, people sometimes call it. I hope that it's not getting old or on your nerves or like, oh God, these guys found a little shtick or their trend or something like that. I understand that if it could feel that way, I hope it doesn't. But if you are curious at all, if you have this feeling where liberty's not enough, or I was an atheist and my sensual pleasures weren't enough, or my worldly pleasures aren't enough, and I've been trying to figure this thing out, and I trust guys like Tommy or Matt or some of these other people, certainly at least look into it and watch. I would say watch Father Turbo on the Royal Path and just give a listen. We all come to the table with so many questions, and feel free to reach out to me if you've got these questions, but just at least give it a shot, because I hope if you're a regular of Tommy's show that you wouldn't think that he's just going to lead you into some strange trend or this cult or something like that, that you respect him and you think, well, Tommy's a pretty smart dude and he sure has been kind of floored by this or taken by this. Just give it a shot. That's would be my advice. And there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of jurisdictions within Orthodoxy, some better than others, but at least look into it and give it a shot would be my advice, my deep thoughts.
Yeah, I would add to that and say if you do find yourself interested, don't listen to somebody like Buck or myself. We are this podcast and our conversation. I've said it so many times before on my show that I find it interesting that so many people want to listen to my phone calls.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just,
that's a good way to put it.
Me and Buck just having a conversation. And if I would suggest you go seek out authorities on the subject, because I'm not one. And it's part of the reason you will never hear me talk theology or anything of that nature. I'm not afraid to talk about my experiences. Correct. Or what I see or how I view something, but I will not at all try to preach to you or tell you what's right or wrong. I'm not here to judge you. There are plenty of atheists that listen to my show, and I appreciate all of y'all. I'm married to an atheist. I have no ill will towards anything y'all think or how y'all view things. Right. And I come from, as Buck also comes from, more of an agnostic worldview. So we understand these things. And so we're not here to preach. We're talking our own experiences and kind of the way we're viewing things at the moment. And we're just allowing y'all to listen into a phone call that we would have had probably anyway.
Yeah. So I can second that. I've had phone calls with Tommy. They were about like this. And to his point, if it ever sounds like I'm preaching, which I hope it doesn't, I'm preaching to the old me, because there's a lot of that where I think back in different ways I thought, and I might be the same way in a year from now or 6 months from now. But if it sounds like I am, it's usually me preaching to the Buck of old. And so it's like, that's my way to burn through some of this past that I'm not happy with on myself. And I honestly think one of the best parts of Orthodoxy is that there isn't a lot of interpreting scripture by lay people, or that we have thousands of years of history to look to. In fact, my priest oftentimes, when hey, I've got a question on this biblical topic, he goes and finds writings from the church fathers or early saints, and he's like, here's the accurate take on that. And sometimes he won't even tell me his own opinion. He will if we're just having discussions, and I'll say, if you had to say your opinion, what do you think of this? But very often he often cites the oldest writings, people that literally were with Peter and the apostles when they were writing the Bible, and that's the explanation he will give me. So we're all used to, many of us, growing up in a world of Western Christianity, and at times it's some of the stuff that turned me off from it, especially as a subculture teenager and in my 20s. The judgmental aspect of it, the
hellfire and brimstone,
Bible thumpers, hellfire and brimstone, then the prosperity gospel types where you've got these liars on TV like Joel Osteen that don't open their doors during a freeze and things like that. If you have angst against those type of things, I am with you. I do too.
Yeah, we definitely do.
Yeah. So I will say that as well. Like there's so much trepidation and fear. Like it's just church. I just don't like church. And it's like, this is not the church that you don't like.
Yeah.
Because you've probably not experienced it, because I hadn't. And I was like, where has this been? Well, It's just been around since the book of Acts. So now we know.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, this was fun. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
It's probably more therapeutic to me.
Yes,
than it is for anything else.
Me too.
Plug away.
Counterflow podcast, Counterflow with Buck Johnson. Go to the YouTube page, hit subscribe. The latest one I have up right now is with a guy named Aman Jabi, and we're talking about the digital existence, the digital prison we're either in or we'll find ourselves in possibly in the next few years. Up next, oh my goodness, next week dropping on Tuesday, my episode with David Gronowski, which is one of my all-time favorite interviews. What a brilliant, sweet, just good person. 2 weeks from now is Father Peter Hears. And if you're interested in any of these type of things we've been talking about, Counterflow with Buck Johnson, it's on all podcast platforms.
Oh, that's cool that you got Father Peter Hears on. He's one of my favorite people to listen to.
Yeah.
But he's kind of intimidating. There's something scary about that man.
I'll find out soon.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to end the recording here.
Thank you, Tommy.
All right, brother.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you waved just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumps down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.